Welcome to Lunch with Legacy Leaders, a weekly talk show with local and national thought leaders on issues impacting the Black community. Now introducing our host, Miss Anne Marie Sorrell.
Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Lunch with Legacy Leaders. I'm your host, Anne Marie Sorrell, President and CEO of the Mosaic Group. Thank you for taking time out of your busy afternoon to join us. But before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible. Thank you to Broward Health, AARP, the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, and the African American Black Alzheimer's Disease Initiative at the John P. Hussman Institute for Human Genomics, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. If you or someone you know is experiencing loss of memory or memory problems, please contact their research team for more information at 877-686-6444. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, a four-time Emmy Award-winning newscaster who also anchors WPLG-Local 10's 4, 5, 6, and 11 p.m. newscast. Welcome, Calvin Hughes.
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing well. Some computer issues this morning, but besides that, I'm just fine.
Good. Well, I know that you're no stranger to South Florida viewers, particularly in the Broward Miami-Dade area. For those who may be joining us from Palm Beach County and other areas, you may be, a new face to them. But congratulations, first of all, and all of your accolades and accomplishments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Ann.
You're welcome. So, I like to start with our guests. Normally I would read a bio, but in lieu of time, I would much prefer for you to give us the brief in your own words of how your journey to, reporting on world leaders, some of the largest and most notable natural disasters, and, just your journey on how you became this award-winning journalist.
Well, Anne Marie, first of all, it's a real pleasure to be on your show. But secondly, I think it's important to understand that people sort of see me now at this point of the movie, but not at the beginning of the movie. So let me kind of take you back a little bit. I have been in South Florida for 15 years, and but before South Florida, I was in Philadelphia. And before Philadelphia, I was in Atlanta. And before Atlanta, I was in Dallas. And before Dallas, I was in Lexington, Kentucky. Before that, I was in Evansville, Indiana. And before that, I began my career in Columbia, Missouri. So it was in Evansville and Lexington, Kentucky, where I really cut my teeth as a reporter. And I think people sort of see you right now at this point of the movie and they think, man, this is, it's always been this way. I remember when I moved to Evansville, Indiana, I probably had one suit and two pair of khaki pants, three ties, no furniture, and I was driving a Toyota Tercel, and I didn't know what was going to happen. I wasn't making much more than a manager at a McDonald's. And I didn't, I couldn't pay most of my bills. I would have to choose between car insurance or paying for my car note. And then obviously I had to pay my rent. And then after that, I was just telling a friend of mine that I do not like fruit cocktail because I had that pretty much every night along with peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So, so this is how I lived. And, and when you don't come from a whole lot, it's tough to call home and ask for money because you don't want to be a burden to them. Because when you're on television, everybody sees you as Steve Harvey and they think that, you have millions of dollars. And so, when you're just starting out, you don't have that kind of money. You're trying to make it to a point where you do have money. So you don't want to be a burden for others. So that's pretty much, that's my beginning. But in terms of South Florida, I came here not knowing much about the Caribbean countries. I didn't know much about Cuba or Haiti. But then one day, some Haitian migrants were trying to make the shore to Hallandale Beach. And I remember being on air and not knowing much about why they were trying to flee their country. And so I went to my bosses and said, hey, look, if you want me to be here for a very long time, I at least need to go to Haiti to try to figure out what's going on. And their response was no. So I tried again, and they said, well, write up a proposal and tell me what you would cover. So that very night, I wrote up a proposal. Next morning, I waited for them to walk from the parking lot into our newsroom, handed it to them. They still said no. And then I tried one final time, and they said yes. And I ended up doing a 1-hour documentary on Haiti. And that was the beginning of my coverage in Haiti. And I haven't stopped going back for 15 years.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. Well, that brings me to, my next question for you. So just months before the July 7th assassination of Haiti's President Moise, and I hope I'm saying it right, Moise,
Yes.
you had an exclusive interview with him. Tell us what that was like.
Well, in the time, obviously, I mean, we had no idea that what was going to happen a couple of months after that interview was going to happen. But I did realize in that moment that it would probably be one of my last interviews with him because his term was going to be up that following year. His term was going to be up in February of 2022. So I knew that unless something, majorly happened, that I probably wouldn't talk with him again as president. And so I asked him questions like, what are you going to do when you leave office? Take me back over the last 4 years. What's going to be your legacy? Questions that you ask somebody who you're not going to talk to again. And so it seemed sort of fortuitous that I would ask him those questions, and what happened on July 7th happened. But in terms of the security, which is what a lot of people ask me about for the interview, it's always one of those situations where you walk into where guys with machine guns are all around you. I mean, there are guys who are with machine guns who are 10 feet away from you. There are those who are standing out in parts of a field, which is where we did the interview. Normally, we would do it in the National Palace, but people are always around you with guns, especially outside. So he was heavily guarded, but he seemed to be tired. He seemed to be relieved that his term was going to be over. But for me, it was probably the most fascinating interview because at the end of your term, you can always say things that you cannot say at the beginning of your term. You know what I mean? So he was very forthcoming about a lot of things. But he knew that his life was in danger. He just didn't know that it was going to be an inside job.
Wow. That's wow. So you recently sat down with an exclusive interview with First Lady Martine Moise following the murder of her husband. What was going through your mind?
So
during that interview.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, during that interview. And then how did you even prepare for it?
So I knew them before they became the first family of Haiti. I had met them prior to, I had interviewed the president of Haiti before Jovenel Moise, who was Michel Martelly. And I had met them at his house. So they were familiar with me, and I was familiar with them. We had talked. In fact, I had had a beer with Jovenel Moise before he became the president of Haiti. So there was a comfort level going on there. And I had met Martine Moise prior to her becoming the first lady of Haiti. So I think you asked the question, what was going through my mind as I interviewed her, or when I was preparing to interview her. I think when you've dealt with tragedy in your own life, you're not looking so much for facts. you are looking to try to make them comfortable with you, because I don't care who you are, to relive a nightmare, um, it's very tough. Uh, if you were to ask me about my mother's passing in 2017, I would only tell you so much, because if I really began talking about her, I would begin to cry. So I think in her case, she was trying not to cry. She was trying to be strong. She wanted to present an image, because I think eventually she will run for president of Haiti. Um, but I think for me, I just wanted to make her feel comfortable enough to tell me as much as she could. So how do you do that? So the night before, I just tried to put myself in her situation, and I used my mother and father's deaths to do that. And I said, if someone were talking to me, what could they ask to make me feel comfortable? And so I think for me, it was more psychological than it was informational. I know a lot of people think, oh, you probably went through the New York Times and Miami Herald and you were studying, you were Googling it and all that. No, I think it was more of a psychological thing that I tried to do, as opposed to try to Dr. Phil her more than I tried to get information from her, tried to 60 minutes her, if you know what I mean.
Wow. No, that's an amazing perspective, and I'm glad
Yeah.
you broke that down. So, what were some of the highlights for you in your conversation with First Lady Louise?
Well, I think I really wanted to know, I think like a lot of viewers, I really wanted to know what happened that night. So I think for me, I couldn't wait to get to just kind of walk me through that night. Now you have to think, while she's talking, I'm visualizing what she's going through. She says the man burst into the room. Her door was unlocked, by the way. They kept their bedroom door unlocked. That's how comfortable, that's how safe they felt with their security team. They burst into the room. They shot her first. And then they stood over him with guns. They thought they had killed her. And so my next question is, okay, as you were lying there, what did you think? What did you hear? And so she said that the men spoke Spanish. So my question was, do you speak any Spanish? Because if you've ever gone to Haiti and you have talked to people who are really educated, they learn four languages: Spanish, English, Creole, and French. But mainly, they don't teach French as much as they do English in the schools nowadays, because the hope is that they will end up, eventually, they'll end up here in America to be able to get educated so they can go back to Haiti to help the country out. But so I asked her, did you know Spanish? She said, no, I don't speak Spanish, but I can understand some of it. So my question is, what did you make out? What did they say, at least on their end of the phone? And she said she didn't know. Do I think that there's more information that she knows that she's not telling me? Absolutely. Um, but I felt like I was able to get enough out of her so that people could pull pieces of the story together. So I think after she was lying there on the ground, I also wanted to know, was her husband tortured? So this is for a couple of reasons. One is, there are people who have in their mind how they thought the president died. Did he just give up? Did he try to fight back? For many people, that's a sign of strength, or it's a sign of weakness. She said there were men standing over him with AK-47s. There's nothing he could do but just lie there. And after they got what they wanted, they were searching for a document. They got what they wanted. They made a phone call. After they got permission on the end of that other phone call to do what they needed to do, they shot him from head to toe with an AK-47 at point blank range. So there are all kinds of pictures and rumors and all these things about, were his eyes gouged? Were bones broken because he was fighting back? She says she has no doubt in her mind that his bones were broken, his eyes were out of his head, because of the close range of the guns. I mean, who knows? Then there was a report that came out last week that said he was actually tortured. He was beaten. So, this is the problem with trying to find the truth. There are many sides. There is her side, there is another person's side, and then there is the truth. So we don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I want to play for our audience just a clip of the interview because it was very riveting for me
Thank
to
you.
watch.
Okay.
When Martine Moise says she began to hear the sound of gunfire.
They was kind of far away, but they were approaching. They became closer and closer and closer. It was the first round of gunshots wake us up.
And then what? Did you think they were attacking? Obviously, they were clearly attacking your residence.
Yeah, they were, but I couldn't think about that. For me, it wasn't possible. No one could do that. So a president in power. Until it died, I didn't realize that it died after he died. Because for me, help was coming. Because there's a bunch of security on the house with us, so we cannot be under attack.
Moise says she remembers for 30 to 40 minutes, gunshots piercing the outside of their private residence, shattering windows. With her own safety in jeopardy, she thought about her 2 children who were in the house.
I went to the kids' room because I know that they were panicking. I didn't want them to come to us. So I went to them. There's a room. In their room, I asked them to go there because in that room there's no window. So I asked them to stay there with the dog, so to keep quiet.
And then you came back to the bedroom where President Moise was.
Yes. He was laying on the floor because at that time, for real, windows were shattering, concrete was flying, and I asked him, "Did you find something? Did you find someone? Did you call someone?" He said, "Yes, I called security. They are on their way."
You felt safe at that point. You felt
Yes,
like you were.
because the people that he said that he called, I know they are coming, because I know those people are loyal. That's what I thought at that time.
Moise says the president called at least 2 top security officials.
He told me that he called Dimitri Error and Jean Laguerre Civil. Those people, he called them. They were part of the security team, and he said that they are coming.
Dimitri Herard and Jean Laguerre Civil never arrived and are now behind bars.
Wow. I wanted to play that because there's so many pieces in there, from a mother trying to protect her children, to the whole question of loyalty and thinking that your security team is protecting you, and there's no way we're under attack. Her thinking there's no way we're safe. We have a whole armed security team. How can this happen? And so just seeing that was so profound to me. In that moment when she was explaining that, what was going through your mind?
Well, I think having heard the story as many times as I heard the story, I think you can't help but to say to yourself, this is the purest form of betrayal. Because I asked her after that, and I'm not sure if that you didn't have it in the clip there, but I'm not sure if it played 3.5 hour special. But I remember her saying distinctly, I asked her, I said, they didn't even resist. She says, resist is not even a word that I would use. She says, resist means you're putting up a fight. She says, they never thought. They just allowed them to come right on in. Never. And so she says, based on that, she knows that they got orders from somebody from the inside. This is not an outside job. Even though outsiders were part of it, she says this is clearly an inside job. And so There are many. Yeah, I mean, obviously um, the most talked about, the most well-known betrayal of all is the Judas kiss, and Judas in the Bible. Of course, we all know that, but this one had the markings of all of that.
Yeah.
The only thing is that Jovel, unlike Jesus, did not know that it was going to happen when it happened. So.
Yeah. So the legacy of President Moise, when you interviewed him, he highlighted three things in his previous interview. And the First Lady, she alluded to some of his legacy, structural legacy, and, just stating that, his life will not be in vain. When we think about the future of Haiti, and we're going to talk about some of the recent developments with the natural disasters and the border in a second, and what's happening at the Texas border in a second. When you think about what he talked about with his legacy, and then his wife talking about it, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, he wasn't the most popular president, and I think that his decision to go after corruption in the Haitian government is a very bold move, which is something I told him actually in our very first interview. And he was also told, and his wife said in the interview, that if you go after corruption, corruption will then come after you. And that's what Jovenel was told the very first time that he decided that he was going to crack down on the corruption in the Haitian government. So you also have to keep in mind, too, that even after you go after someone who is doing something bad, if they can then market that it's not the bad guy who is the problem, it's actually the good guy who went after me who is the problem. I think that's something that he had to deal with. From a marketing standpoint, he didn't understand that the people who were part of the corruption were going to make him out to be the problem and not them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It was the reverse psychology.
Exactly. So he had to deal with the politics of that. But when you're new to office, you got to keep in mind he never held public office before. So the game of politics needs to be understood prior to getting into the game. So in order to be masterful at it, you got to be able to understand the game of politics. So he wasn't very good at that. And when you only have one shot at it, you're not always going to get it right. So I think people are going to make him out to be something that he isn't. And he was, and he has been. And that's one of the reasons why he wasn't one of the most popular presidents. In fact, probably one of the most unpopular presidents in modern times for Haiti. And I will also say this. Now, he says his legacy is going to be providing electricity for the country. That's only if somebody else comes along and carries out his policies, which is what his wife wants to do. He made a deal with the Taiwanese government to borrow tens of millions of dollars in order to provide the entire country with electricity. There are a lot of people who live in the countryside. After a certain hour, they have to obviously use candlelights as their only way to have any source of light in their home. He was hoping to change that, but I don't think there's another president right now. Obviously, they have bigger issues. They're not going to carry out those policies. So I think what he wanted his legacy to be and what it actually will be two different things.
Wow. Let's talk about, like you said, they have bigger problems right now. Of course, there's security problems, but then they just had an earthquake followed by a tropical storm. And then somehow somebody got the notice to say, go to the Texas border and the U.S. will let you in. So I want to hear your thoughts on just these recent developments of Haiti and what's happening.
So here's what I want people to do. When you get a chance, the Haitians who are coming to the Texas border, they speak Creole, but they speak Spanish a whole lot better than they speak Creole. So you got to ask the question, why do they speak Spanish better than they speak Creole? Why is Spanish their first language? Because for the past several years, they have been living in Chile. You might say, well, why Chile? Because I remember going over there years ago, and I wanted to do this story, but years ago, someone told me Haitians are going to Chile. Chile is providing flights. So basically, what would happen is that a business owner from Chile would send somebody to Haiti, spread the word that there are jobs and opportunities in Chile. People would then try to get money, but the owners, the business owners, would provide a certain amount of money. You hop on a plane, you go to Chile, you work for me, you're already indebted to me because I flew you here for thousands of dollars. So instead of me paying you money, your wages are already sort of baked into the equation that you owe me for flying you and getting you here. So in other words, I'm a form of cheap labor in Chile. When Chile was done with the Haitians who had come over there, they basically kicked them out of the country. They were never really wanted there. Their labor was wanted, but the people were not. So those people were then sent to Central and North America. I'm sorry, Central and South America to get them out of their country. And those were the people who were sent to the Texas border. And they're saying, look, we can provide you with an opportunity to get into America now. So you can have another opportunity. We don't want you in our country anyway. The jobs are not there. So we don't want you in our country. And so those are the people who were at the Texas border, because you got to ask yourself, how in the heck does somebody how do you go from Port-au-Prince to Texas? This is impossible to do. You actually have an ocean you got to cross. So how is this even possible? So they were coming through Chile, through Brazil, and through other places like that, where this is cheap labor. They were thinking, look, I can get an education and a job in America. So this is how so human traffickers were taking them from Chile, Brazil, and other parts of Central and South America and shipping them to the Texas border to Del Rio. $8,000 could get you there with hopes of getting into America. So this is how they ended up there. Now, is it fair for this country to ship them back to Haiti? No, because Haiti is dealing with a situation right now that even in this country, if we were struck with an earthquake, a tropical storm, and the president of our country was assassinated, that's tough to recover from. All in 1 year, by the way. And oh, by the way, there's a pandemic where most of the country has not received vaccinations. So is it fair to ship them back? No. But not all of them are being shipped back. I know people saw the image of the border agent using a whip on the guy who was holding the food in the Rio Grande. And it was a horrible image. Trust me, heartbreaking to see for everybody. Even if you care just a little bit, even the biggest bigot saw that image and said, this is unfair. But not all Haitians who were at the Texas border are being shipped back to their country. Some are actually being allowed in. If you have a sponsor, if you're pregnant, or if you have family members, some of them are actually coming to South Florida. Some are being shipped to other places. So I think we have to be careful not to be too emotional about what we saw. But certainly what we saw was enough to make us all emotional and very upset, because it brought back images of what happened during slave times. So it is a very complicated, very political issue. But I think the bottom line is we need to give people in Haiti a reason to stay versus a reason to leave. And so if gangs were taking over parts of the country, you would want to leave America. If an earthquake struck your home and you lost everything, obviously you'd want to leave if there's a better opportunity somewhere. If a tropical storm came by and flooded out all of your belongings and you had nothing, you would want to leave too if there's a better opportunity. And if the president of your country was assassinated and your government was in chaos, you'd want to go somewhere else where there was less chaos and where you can have an opportunity. It doesn't matter what your culture is, what your race is, it doesn't matter who you are. We all just want one basic thing, an opportunity to reach our fullest potential. And that's all they're asking for. That's all they're asking for. So that's my take on it.
Mhm.
That's my take. Oh, go ahead.
No, I appreciate your take. You really shed a lot of light and gave some really good insight, because I didn't even know about the Chile situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that to the forefront.
Yeah.
And I think what folks are saying, especially on social media, and all the emotions with it is, we just saw, and I know it's two completely different situations. And I think when we, as people, we don't, we have the whole Afghan situation. And when you have the US and Airbnb and everybody crying out for, Afghans to help and to save, but then, on the same front, it's like, where's that same energy? So I think for people who don't understand policy, who don't understand politics and all of that, it becomes a part of, where's the same energy? It doesn't look equal. It doesn't look right, and I think that's where the public perception of public dispute is that, the United States of America, has a responsibility, because of what you just said, with everything that Haiti has gone through in the last year. And it does look like, because they're Black, it doesn't apply to the same help that's been extended doesn't apply to Haitians. So that's the perception, even though we know it's much more complicated behind the scenes, but that is the public perception. And so this Biden administration has to fight that public perception. And then when you have corporate entities that extend a hand to other countries, i.e. Airbnb, like Afghans, and you have people whose homes were destroyed in Haiti that needs Airbnb. I'm just, throwing that out there. The public perception, kind of overshadows whatever policies and politics are involved.
I know exactly what you're saying. And I think I have a really good friend who's Haitian American who is mad at me because I said the two situations should not be compared. But I could see the timing of both of them coming together in a way that people think that there is a tie between the two. The Afghans are being helped out because the government had a contract with them. The government had a deal with them. Now, just reverse it. If the Afghans were trying to come here, but the Haitians had helped the U.S. military for 20 years, put their lives in jeopardy, and there was a contract that said, if I help you, at the end of all of this, you help me. And the U.S. government began helping the Afghans and not helping the Haitians. Just think, if there was a war for 20 years in Haiti and the situations were reversed. So the two situations, people have tried to simplify them by saying, well, if you can help them, then you can help the Haitians. They aren't the same thing. But I do understand what you're saying. I also know that Biden is looking at all of this, and everything is political. Trust me. Everything that you are looking at is political. And because of that, there is a midterm election coming up. And the feeling is that if they're too sympathetic to people who are trying to get into this country, there is a movement out there, whether you see it on any of the cable channels or not, there's a movement out there where people believe that they are being replaced. There's a certain group of people whose skin color does not look like ours, who they believe at some point they're being replaced. And that alone is enough to motivate them to do things that, that we saw in the last couple of years and create conspiracy theories and beliefs about elections that aren't true and on and on and on. simply based on the fact that they're fearful that they're going to be replaced one day. And seeing Haitians, even though it's only 15,000 of them, which isn't a very large number, 15,000 of them standing there waiting to get into our country, as if that's enough to replace a certain group of people, they believe that. So, so everything is political. Biden is looking at that, and he knows that there is a price to pay if he doesn't at least give the image that I'm taking you back to where you started out, you know. But
Yeah.
those flights, it was 10 flights and 1,400 people who were on those flights out of 15,000. It isn't a very large number, but for any one of them, many of them, by the way, we had video on our newscast of some of them who were rushing back onto the plane, like the Afghans were, to try to come back to this country. It's a very sad thing when you think about it. There are a lot of Americans who take for granted what they have here. And there are those who will literally jump onto the wing of a plane knowing that death is on the other side by jumping on this plane like that, taking off just to try to get into the country. That enough should be so much to motivate a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 21-year-old to do better in this country, to take advantage of all opportunities, I think.
Yeah. No, you have a good point. We're very fortunate. We take a lot of things for granted. I want to bring it back as we get ready to close out this segment,
Okay.
to our discussion of First Lady Moise. And when we talk about, like you said, people are fleeing their country,
Yeah,
because of just life and all the hardships. But here we have a woman who is going back home to her country.
Yeah.
And I want to play that clip.
Sure.
And I want to get your thoughts on that. And then I'm going to just highlight some of my favorite quotes from the interview that she talked about. So if we can play that clip of where Calvin was closing out the interview with her and just some of the things that she said.
As she supports the Haitian people, she hopes they continue to support her. A message she tried to convey when she returned to Haiti for the president's funeral.
How did it feel to go back that very first time? Were you nervous? Were you scared?
No, because fear holds you back.
But for the people who were watching, you wanted them to see that maybe the father is not around, but the mother of the country.
He's still here. And I will always be here for them. Always.
An article in the New York Times quoted the First Lady as saying she would one day run for president.
When the New York Times article came out, there are so many people who were upset, mainly Haitian Americans who thought, how could you even talk about politics when your husband had just been buried?
I just told her too that I won't let the vision and the mission of my husband die.
Yeah.
I won't.
Many Haitians felt like you lost them in that moment, that you
They don't have to let me go because I need them to go on. I will always serve them because I will always live in my country.
Wow. You're going back home.
I'm going back home when I'm done.
After everything that happened, you're going back to Haiti.
How long can I stay in the U.S.? How long? What other place that I have? Home is home. Home may be hell, but it's home.
To me, that last sentence, home is home. Home may be hell, but it's home. That's some serious dedication to your country.
Oh, yeah, she is. She is committed to making Haiti a better place. She has a lot of hope for the country, but you got to think, if you lose hope, you've lost everything. And so I think in her case, she knows that Haiti can be much better than what it is. And so even though natural disasters seem to be a norm here lately, and some man-made disasters too, in terms of politics and the assassination, she knows that Haiti can be a much better place. You have to keep in mind that if you go back to the early 1900s, even the mid 1900s, Haiti was called the Pearl of the Caribbean. I mean, Haiti was a place where if you had a home in Haiti and in Beverly Hills, I mean, you were considered, you were doing all right. Um, there are places in Haiti that I have gone that I will tell you, it's some of the most beautiful places I've ever seen in my life. And it's such a contrast. There was a book that was once written about Haiti, and the title of it was called A Beautiful Nightmare, called Haiti, A Beautiful Nightmare. And talk about a contrast of words there. It's a beautiful place, but in some parts, it is your worst nightmare. You just don't want to be seen at a certain hour. But you could say that about a lot of countries, but Haiti obviously has had its unique set of circumstances in terms of calamities and natural disasters. And I mean, two devastating earthquakes, 11 years apart, 7.2, the latest one, 7.3. Right after that, a tropical storm. I mean, you can't even, you talk about hell, that is hell on earth if you're living through that. But the people are beautiful. They don't have much, but I will tell you, they will offer you the shirt off their back. They'll invite you into their home. They don't have much to give, but they will give you what little they have. And so these things keep me going back to a country that needs help and hope. And if I can provide with just a little bit of hope from what I do, I'll continue to go back and I'll continue to do it.
Absolutely. And with that, there's a couple of quotes that I really like that she said that stood out to me. One was, even though the heart is broken, the mind is still strong.
Yeah.
And that was very strong to me, to just show her strength. And another one for our viewers, fear holds you back. That was another one that really stood out. And of course, her last one, home is home, maybe hell, but it's home. So those are just some profound pieces that I pulled out of the conversation that you had with her.
Well, sisters are always going to make a way. Black women are always going to make a way. I mean, it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, obviously I spoke about my mother. She'll always be my hero. I mean, I put her up there with the Dr. King and Muhammad Ali and all the other people that I admire, but she is a class all by herself, because when it is one thing to read about greatness, it's another thing to see strength and greatness. So, sisters make a way out of no way. And even when things aren't going right, through prayer, you'll find a way. So I know she has had to pray a lot, and she's had to rely on her inner strength a lot, but she's an amazing woman. She's very strong. And from that interview, people saw a different side of her. And I think it's a side that exists in, if not most, all Black women.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. And we'll put the link to the interview in the chat. Are there any other closing thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience?
Oh, man. Well, I think if I can just say this, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it because we can actually do a whole nother show on this, but it's about the truth. I mean, it is under attack today. And you got to be careful where you get your information from. I mean, I have people who have talked to me about everything from politics to the vaccine, and what people have heard about the vaccine. I had one guy tell me last week, I heard you can't give blood if you get the vaccine. And I said, well, where'd you get that information from? He said, oh, a friend of mine told me. I said, oh, so you mean to tell me you're going to get your information from a friend of yours versus getting it from someone like I myself, to where I have an obligation to tell the truth, whereas your friend is just kind of making it up as he goes along or she goes along. So I think people need to be careful about when they share information on Facebook. It seems a very innocent thing to do, but it's not. Because if you keep passing along a lie and people trust you to tell the truth, then you're aiding a movement out there that I think is out of control. There's a great saying that, you know, a lie can travel halfway around the world before the truth can put its shoes on. And it's very true, especially with the internet and social media. People all the time, they are spreading false misinformation. And to me, that is even bigger than the pandemic that we're in. It's this wave of lies and untruths out there. So be careful where you get your information. Have reliable sources of people who you can look at and know that they are going to give you good information. Otherwise, you're going to make very bad decisions off bad information. So, yeah, and again, we can do a whole nother show on that one though. But that's a that's a heavyweight topic.
Well, we'll have to invite you back to do the segment on that. But, thank you, Calvin, for just being the person who's out here reporting the truth, being that reliable source of information. You have shed so much light on us today. For those who have not watched your interview, we have put the link in the comments. So please check out the full interview. But thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. And just thank you for all the great coverage and all the great work that you do in our community, not just on the reporting. I didn't get to highlight some of the great things you do from your, that's in your bio, but continue to do all the great work that you do in our community.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, Anne-Marie.
No problem. Stay with us for just a quick moment. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in again. I want to thank our sponsors once again for making this broadcast possible: Broward Health, AARP, the Solid Waste Authority of Palm Beach County, and the African American Black Alzheimer's Disease Initiative at the John P. Hussman Institute for Human Genomics, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine. Please be sure to check out our current issue where we're featuring South Florida's 40 under 40, Black leaders of today and tomorrow. And we will be having our upcoming issue, which will be featuring South Florida's top Black healthcare professionals. So stay tuned for more information on that. And also be sure that you check out our show Soul, hosted by Nikki Jellin, every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m., as well as our other shows. So we have a show for you every single day to get you in touch with your finances, as well as featuring Black-owned businesses in South Florida. And of course, we are definitely tapping into the flavors of Black South Florida by featuring many restaurants and doing reviews on those with Chef Irie. So you can learn all of that at MIA Media Group. That's MIAmediagrp.com. Make sure you sign up for our newsletter. Follow all of our social media networks. And as always, please share this video because there's someone out there that will benefit from this information. And join us again next Thursday at noon. Thank you all.